Rachel had never met her Aunt Margaret. She barely even knew she existed. Just a name whispered in awkward family silences, someone long ago deemed unwell and quietly removed from holiday gatherings. So, when the letter arrived from a solicitor's office informing her she'd inherited Margaret's estate, Rachel assumed it was a mistake. But it wasn't. Margaret's name was on the deed. A crumbling Victorian manor tucked at the edge of a small town Rachel had never heard of, Ashmere. The house was old, the papers said, unoccupied for over a decade. Dusty, yes. Structurally sound, mostly. She was still staring at the photos of the property when her phone buzzed again. The lawyer's email read, "You are free to do as you wish with the home, sell, renovate, or live in it." She chose to visit. When she arrived, the first thing she noticed was the silence. No cars, no people, just wind rustling the overgrown hedges lining the path to the door, paint peeled from the shutters. The gate hung open, rusted at the hinges. The front steps creaked beneath her boots. The key turned easily, too easily. Inside, it smelled like lavender and damp wood. Dust clung to the air in thick strands, catching the light like cobwebs. The furniture was old but preserved, covered in white sheets that fluttered when she walked past. But it wasn't the furniture that made her stop in her tracks. It was the mirrors. Every room had one. Not just bathrooms or bedrooms, every room. Hallways, stairwells, even inside closets. Some small and handheld, others full length and mounted to the walls with ornate golden frames. Rachel felt them before she saw them. That subtle pull, that feeling of being watched without knowing where from. She told herself it was just her imagination, just the house being old, strange, unfamiliar. But as she walked down the narrow second-floor hallway, one mirror in particular caught her attention. Oval-shaped, deep mahogany frame, slightly warped glass, and in it, her reflection was smiling. She wasn't. Her lips were still, her expression flat, but the woman in the glass grinned, just slightly, just long enough to be real. Rachel blinked and stepped back. The smile was gone. Her reflection was normal again. She laughed nervously. Okay, that's fine, creepy, but fine. She closed the bedroom door behind her, trying not to look at the tall mirror on the far wall as she passed it. But it was too late. The reflection was already watching her, and it didn't blink when she did. Rachel didn't sleep well that night. She tried, but every time she closed her eyes, she imagined the house creaking in time with something, watching, waiting, breathing when she didn't. She woke up around 3 a.m. to the sound of soft scratching. She lay still, eyes fixed on the ceiling, straining to hear. At first, she thought it was mice. Then she realized it was too steady, too rhythmic, coming from the mirror. She sat up slowly. The tall mirror across the room stood silently in the moonlight. Her reflection looked back, but something felt off. She waved. Her reflection followed perfectly. She narrowed her eyes. Then her reflection blinked, a split second too late. Rachel's chest tightened. "Nope," she whispered, grabbing a spare blanket and throwing it over the mirror. She forced herself back into bed, heart pounding until exhaustion finally took her under. The next morning, she decided to ignore it, chalk it up to being in a new place, an old house, an overactive imagination. But the feeling didn't go away. In the kitchen, she caught her reflection in the antique toaster, just barely. Her head turned one way. The reflection moved slower, too slow. In the bathroom, her mirror self looked directly at her, but her head was tilted just slightly to the left when Rachel's wasn't. She pulled away with a shudder. Later that afternoon, she opened a hallway closet and found another mirror. This one handheld, propped up inside a shoebox, like it had been hidden away. She picked it up and gasped. Her reflection had bruises, deep purple smudges beneath the eyes. a faint trickle of blood at the corner of the mouth. But her real face was untouched. She dropped the mirror. It didn't break, just landed face down on the wood floor, silent and still. She left it there. By sunset, Rachel had a new rule: don't look in mirrors. She covered the ones she could, hung spare bedsheets, old towels, clothes, anything to keep the glass hidden. The more she covered, the lighter she felt, like pressure slowly lifting from her skull. That night she made tea and sat in the parlor to calm her nerves. The fire crackled gently. The quiet was almost peaceful, until she saw movement. Across the room, a mirror she had missed. A small one, resting on a shelf behind a vase. She turned to it slowly. Her reflection stared back at her. But it wasn't her face. It was older, sunken, and it was grinning again. A cold sweat broke across her skin. Then it lifted its hand and pointed. Behind her. She turned. Nothing. But when she looked back at the mirror, the reflection was gone. The glass showed only the room now. Empty. Rachel stood frozen, breath caught in her throat. Then, from somewhere deep in the house, she heard it. A faint, glassy whisper. "Let me in." Rachel didn't sleep at all. She sat on the edge of her bed until the sky turned gray, the whisper echoing in her mind like a splinter. "Let me in." It hadn't come from a dream. She was sure of that now. She was awake. She had felt it. That cold breath on the back of her neck, the impossible weight of being watched from every angle. By morning, she'd made up her mind. She had to understand what this house really was, what her aunt had left behind. She started in the attic. Dust coated everything. Boxes stacked shoulder high, old furniture under sheets, forgotten family heirlooms. But on the far side, hidden behind an armoire and covered with a faded quilt, was a door. Small, wooden, nailed shut. At eye level, the word "no" had been scratched into the surface, deep, jagged gouges made by something sharp. Rachel stared at it for a long time. Then she fetched a hammer. It took work, but eventually the nails gave. The door creaked open into a cramped room lit only by slats of gray light slipping through warped wooden walls. Inside, mirrors. Dozens of them. Smashed, cracked, covered in cloth, propped in corners and leaned against the walls like discarded bodies. Every surface seemed to reflect at a wrong angle. It was hard to tell where the room began or ended. The air was thick, still. It smelled like dust and old metal. In the center of the room sat a box. Inside, she found newspaper clippings, brittle letters, and pages torn from journals. Her aunt's name, Margaret Whitlow, was scribbled on the edges of several. Rachel flipped through them with shaking hands. April 6th, 1998. I've seen her again. Not in the mirror I used yesterday. A different one. She's following me, copying me. Almost perfect now. Almost. July 12th, 1999. I covered every mirror, but she moved. She moved when I didn't. I watched it happen. She wants out. She keeps smiling. December 3rd, 2001. They said I was hallucinating, but I see her in every reflection now, even in my tea, even in my eyes. Final entry, March 17th, 2002. The others don't believe me, but I know what the mirrors are. They aren't for seeing ourselves, they're doors, and some of them are already open. Rachel swallowed hard. She glanced at the largest mirror in the room, covered in a heavy black sheet and chained at the corners. There was a single word carved across the frame: watching. She didn't want to look, but she did. She stepped closer, hands trembling, and peeled back the edge of the cloth. For a moment, the glass showed nothing. Then, slowly, her reflection emerged. But it wasn't standing still. It was closer than it should have been, eyes wide, smiling softly, and behind it, another version of her, and another, and another. Dozens, hundreds, all pressed against the other side of the mirror. All grinning, all waiting. Rachel screamed and yanked the cloth back over the glass, heart hammering in her chest. In the silence that followed, she heard a soft creak behind her. She spun around. The door to the attic was closed. She hadn't closed it. And on the inside of the wooden panel was a mirror she hadn't seen before. Her reflection was smiling, and this time it raised its hand and knocked. Once. Tap. Rachel didn't go back into the attic. She locked the door, nailed it shut again, draped a chair in front of it like that would stop anything if it really wanted to get out. But something had changed. The house felt thinner now, like a wall had come down. Her own reflection was beginning to feel foreign. The way she looked, the way she moved, the way her eyes held on to her longer than they used to. She avoided mirrors as much as possible, brushed her teeth in the dark, used her phone's front camera as a quick check. Even that had started glitching. And then she began to feel it inside her, like she was losing time. Moments she couldn't explain. She'd blink and be standing somewhere else in the house. She'd reach for her phone and realize it was already in her hand. One night she found her shoes on the wrong feet, muddy. But she hadn't left the house. At least she didn't remember leaving. And the worst part, she started seeing herself. Not in mirrors, not in reflections, in rooms. Once she passed by the hallway and swore she saw someone duck around the corner. Same height, same hair, same clothes, gone before she could reach them. Another time she found her bedroom door slightly ajar, even though she never left it open anymore. Inside, everything looked untouched, except for the mirror. The sheet had been pulled down, and there was a fingerprint on the glass. Only not hers. Too long, too sharp, almost clawed. The next morning, Rachel found a note on her bedside table, written in her own handwriting, but she didn't remember writing it. You're not the only version of you. And you're not the strongest one. Panic clawed at her chest. She grabbed the nearest mirror, a small, round compact she'd overlooked, and stared into it. Her reflection stared back. But this time there was no delay. It blinked when she blinked, smiled when she didn't. Then, without warning, it mouthed the words, "Too late." Rachel dropped the mirror, stumbling back, and that's when she saw it, her reflection in the window, not moving, not mirroring, just watching her, smiling. And behind that version of her, another figure stepped into view, just a dark silhouette blurred by the glass. Then another, and another, stacked like a hallway of mirrors. Only they were all real, all her, but not quite. Some were crying, some were laughing, some looked dead, but only one was still, the one with the smile. It raised its hand and placed it against the inside of the glass. And then she felt her own hand rise, completely on its own. Like a puppet, her body moved, but her mind screamed. She wasn't in control anymore. Not entirely. Something was inside the house now, and worse, something was inside her. Rachel didn't leave the house. She couldn't. Every time she reached the front door, her reflection would be standing there, in the glass of the entryway, in the brass doorknob, in the framed photo beside it, waiting, watching, smiling. She tried smashing mirrors, hiding them. But even after breaking every one she could find, the reflections stayed, in puddles, in her tea, in the glass of the microwave, and every one of them was her, but different. Sometimes the changes were small, a bruise on the cheek, a twitch beneath the eye, but other times it was worse. Gaping mouths, pitch black eyes, rotted skin, and still they smiled. She knew what was happening now. She had read it in her aunt's journals. They watch, they wait, and if you look too long, they come through. Rachel had looked for too long, too many times, and now they were coming. The final straw was the mirror in the foyer. She had left it covered, taped and wrapped like a body, but that morning it was bare, gleaming, as if it had never been touched. Rachel stood in front of it and saw herself, but not quite. The version staring back was calm, peaceful, hair neater, skin clearer, too perfect. The reflection raised its hand. Rachel didn't move. Then the reflection mouthed, "It's better here." Rachel's breath caught in her throat. The reflection turned, and behind it was a space she didn't recognize, dark, endless, echoing, a void. The reflection turned back and smiled wider. It mouthed again, "Trade." Rachel shook her head. "No." And then her own hand, without her command, pressed against the glass. She screamed and tried to pull back, but her arm wouldn't move. Her body didn't feel like her own. She stared into the mirror as cracks spread across her image. Not in the glass, but in herself. Like her reflection was shattering her from the inside. The reflection began to push. Rachel felt her feet slide forward. She braced herself, dug her heels into the floor, tears streaming down her face. "No," she shouted, "you're not me." But it didn't matter. The glass rippled, and she was pulled through. Silence. For a moment, everything was still. Then, the mirror shimmered again. Rachel's body stood on the other side, in the foyer, breathing, blinking, but not Rachel. She turned toward the front door, smoothed her hair, opened it slowly, and smiled at the world outside. The real Rachel, she stood trapped on the other side of the glass, a shadow in the mirror. Her mouth opened to scream, but no sound came out. Only a fog formed on the inside of the glass where she breathed, over and over, the same silent words. "Let me out. Let me out. Let me out." She saw something in the mirror that wasn't her. Now she isn't her. She's just a reflection.